Hello, everybody. Welcome to Urban Empowerment Ministries Mental Health Matters Episode 1. My name is Kayla, and I am so happy to have all of you joining us today. We would like to thank you for joining us. Let us know where you're viewing from today. We would love to know the impact and the reach that we are having with this content that we plan to share today. While you are dropping where you're from in the comments, please go ahead and like this and share this with your network. We believe that this is something that everyone can benefit from, and we look forward to engaging and connecting with you in conversation today. So what we will be discussing is grief and loss. We know that this is something that, being in this unprecedented time this year, we've all experienced. So we just want to shed some light on what that has been like for us, our experiences, how we have overcome, and, just give you tips and let you know that you are not alone in your experiences of grief. God, we thank you for this time and for letting us see yet another day. We thank you for each person who has joined and who will join this broadcast. We thank you for life. We thank you for health. We thank you for protecting, providing. And we know that this time is a time full of grief and loss. We've all lost our sense of normalcy. So we pray that, people are reminded that your strength is made perfect in our weakness, and that you are the lifter of all bowed down heads. God, I pray that everyone who watches this is edified and is able to draw something to help them with their experiences, God. I thank you for our facilitators and for everyone who will be sharing today. I thank you for strength and vulnerability that you have imparted in everyone to share their stories for the benefit of others. God, most of all, I just pray that you be glorified. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen. So, how we will begin this is I just want to give everyone a brief definition of what exactly grief is. So, grief typically comes after loss. And grief is those conflicting feelings that, are caused by a change in something that is familiar to us. So this looks different for many people. And, it's not necessarily just death. We can experience grief with divorce, loss of health, moving, or job loss. But more specifically, I want to have a few mental health moments where I share with you all the 5 stages of grief. So you will later hear about the experiences of several people and how they have experienced their grief. We know that everyone is unique and we all process and experience these things differently. However, research shows that there are 5 main stages to grief. So first, before we jump into our first segment, I just want to give you 2 of the 5 stages of grief that many people experience. The first stage of grief is denial. So denial looks like an unwillingness to accept the reality of the loss. So if we look at this in the sense of losing people, it can kind of be hard to believe that someone who we have had in our lives, sometimes for our entire lives, is gone. And, we really have trouble coming to terms with that. And then with that denial, we can sometimes see that manifest into the next stage of grief, which is anger. So these are feelings of upset and rage. For many of us, when we experience grief and loss, we are kind of at a place of disbelief that, this could happen to us. Why does it have to be me who loses this person? Why does it have to be me who loses my health? Why do I have to move away from that environment that I have been comfortable with? And with that, a lot of times, we get upset, we feel rage. So with that, we want to segue into our first segment of our Mental Health Matters segment, which basically we will hear from 2 people about their experiences with grief and how they have been able to cope and deal with these things.
Well, welcome to our broadcast on Mental Health Matters with Urban Empowerment. I am Pastor Christine Woods. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and therapist. And today we're going to be talking about mental health matters. And this episode will be about coping with holiday grief. Coping with holiday grief. And as we proceed in this conversation, we know that things like this can cause distress and distress of your emotions. And so we have today a process room. So for those of you who are watching this broadcast and you might become overwhelmed, we want to encourage you to reach out to our prayer and process room on Zoom, and you can see the link up as I am speaking at this moment. So this episode will be about 30 minutes or so, and we are going to have some engaging conversation with 2 familiar faces that you might know in terms of coping with holiday grief. And I'm going to introduce those folks to you. I'm going to first introduce you to Pastor Johnny Moss.
Hello. Thanks for having me. So good to see everybody. Indeed. I'm Pastor Johnny Moss, as Pastor Christine has alluded to. I am originally from Madison, Wisconsin, currently reside in Columbia, Missouri. I serve as an associate pastor and a musician at Urban Empowerment Ministries. and currently am operating as the founder and I guess you could say CEO of my own business, which is freight expediting and freight brokering, and called Moss Transportation Solutions. So I've been doing that for the last 2 years or so. And so currently I'm in North Carolina, just kind of waiting until the next shipment, the next load. So I have a lot of time to sit here and have these wonderful conversations with family. So it's good to be here.
Likewise. Thank you for being with us. And then we have Sister Letitia. Would you mind introducing yourself to our viewers?
Sure. So my name's Letitia. I am originally from Chicago, Illinois. I came to Columbia, Missouri for college. So I graduated from the University of Missouri 2008 with my bachelor's in biology, and then in 2018 with my master's in public health. I served at UE that entire time. So from my sophomore year of college all the way up until I transitioned back home in 2017. I currently work as a project manager with sickle cell patients for the Indiana Hemophilia and Thrombosis Center.
Thank you so much, so much. We are just excited to have both of you home, at least home with us here. And so we are looking forward to hearing your stories with regard to holiday grief. And, as we go into our conversations, I think it's important, we talk about holiday grief and how it could be really intense, during this time. I know that there was a notion that holiday grief began to happen, around the beginning of November and then on to New Year's. But, I am inclined to say at this moment, there are Mother's Days, there's Father's Days, Memorial Days, birthdays. And for me, in working with different people, grief is just not at the holiday season, but grief is often experienced year round. And so, both of you have lost a loved one, and we just want to hear your journey. And this may be the first, holidays that you're without your loved ones. And so we want to hear that journey and begin to have a dialogue about how you're actually grieving with that or dealing with that. And then how are you embracing that journey in your own right? And so, Johnny, I'll start with you. Grief is really, our natural response. It's the emotional response or feeling that we get when we've lost someone that we love, when we lost something that we loved. And, can you tell us, your journey in grief or with the loss of a loved one at this time?
Sure. Earlier this year, I think it was in January, I had, my father had passed away. And I guess with being like a part of his health journey for like 5 years and just understanding what he was dealing with as it relates to, the things that he was dealing with as far as diabetes, kidney failure and everything, and being there with him through that journey, and then to kind of, have it come to an end the way that it did come to an end, it was difficult. Even as we approach the holidays now, I think this year, as you had stated, as we deal with the grief from different, my birthday was a week after he had passed. So the first and having to, the challenges and just, not only dealing with him being gone, but then also, those times where you're normally supposed to celebrate, that was a hard thing to navigate and to be able to, accept, I guess, for a lack of a better term.
Absolutely.
And so I knew that, kind of like, even as we approach like the holidays, and, there's a lot of things that that I still hold, in memory of my father, and, and the way that especially the way that the church family, we had embraced him, even in those last 5 years that he was around. It was a strong impact, but even at the same time, having you all there was very comforting and helpful for me to even deal with some of the deal with the grief. I'm sorry, because even talking about it now kind of gets to me. But being able to have people around who were there along with the journey, understood what he was going through and the suffering and everything like that, really helped me to be able to embrace things that you all said, and, encouragement, even the conversations that me and you had and everything really helped me to embrace that. But it has been a challenging year since he has passed. And even as we approach the holidays, the Thanksgiving, the Christmas, and then as we come upon a year, there are things that, that still hit, but I also know that there are things that I can do to be able to help. And so, the talking to the therapist, and then, being able to have conversation and being able to resolve a lot of things that happened as a result of him passing, have been helpful as well.
Absolutely. And, Letitia, I'm going to have you chime in here just as well to share your story. And Johnny, you mentioned so many remarkable things about grief. And, that one thing is really acceptance. And Kubler is a theorist who talked about the stages of grief and that there being 5 stages, but I don't want to quite go into that yet, but you have dropped some nuggets that I am going to recap on because they're very important for our audience and our viewers to kind of know about that grief process. And you're certainly, kind of vacillating throughout that process, even to the point where, you discuss coping as well. So I'm going to thank you for sharing that. Letitia, tell us a little bit about your story of your grief journey in this, your story of firsts throughout this first year or so of the demise of your mom.
Sure. So, and I consider myself going through 2 kind of separate grief processes at the same time because so my mom passed in April of 2019. So this is going to be my second holiday season without her. But shortly after that, we also found out my grandmother had dementia. So she's in the place now where she doesn't really remember that the holidays are occurring. And this was kind of her favorite season. So I have the journey of kind of accepting these holidays. And it was something important you mentioned earlier about this isn't the only season that we experience that her birthday happens to be New Year's Day. So I'm experiencing that going into a new year without her, as well as celebrating her birthday. And then having her pass unexpectedly a year short of a huge milestone and turning 30, having to go through now really adult womanhood. Without her, that journey, it goes up and down. She was a huge impact in my life, and having to navigate now without her makes it difficult, especially in the holidays when you are recognizing that you're going through something and it's completely different now as an adult than it was in your childhood. So with both her and my grandma not really recognizing it, my traditions for Christmas have completely shifted. And I try to go from the place of trying to accept these holidays with my grandmother as these may be the last ones she may have. And even though she doesn't necessarily remember that it's Christmas or it's Thanksgiving, giving her those subtle reminders, like keeping the Christmas tree up a little bit longer, having her go through wrapping even her own presents because she knows, that it'll be brand new that day. Keeping some of those traditions that are in honor of my family unit, but then also having to establish a new tradition with new family members or building closer relationships with maybe extended family that you didn't necessarily have, and letting them love on you and being open to, although those traditions will forever stay in your heart, it's okay to evolve and start to create new ones and incorporate the 2, bringing in what you love about the holidays you spend with those who may be gone now or maybe in the transition of not remembering, but also having this new experience that you can build on for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't sound, for you, just going through just one grief, wasn't enough, but you're experiencing multiple, of perceived losses, right? That you've experienced. And, the thing about, losing your mom, this is generations we're talking here, right? So to have the loss of your mom and then now, your grandmother is sick, and that anticipatory grief is just as devastating as it is grieving for the loss of your mom. So the act of really anticipating, as you mentioned, that you, expect that this might be the last times, right, that you're having to spend with your mom. And, that can be just as detrimental as active grief is. Both of you have made some, and I want to open this dialogue here. Both of you have made some, good recognitions of, how you're dealing with grief, how you're coping with grief. And there are these stages of grief that aren't necessarily, as research has said over time, that we vacillate through these. So there's no one stage to actually sit in and stay in, and there's a successive order. And those 5 stages of grief is denial. There is acceptance. There is bargaining. And again, you're going back into anger and denial, and then acceptance, and then, these stages kind of vacillate. So when you think of these stages of grief, how have you been able to kind of, deal with that, from denial to anger to bargaining to acceptance? How have you been able to cope with those in those stages, and can you see that?
I think for me personally, I guess it goes back to just actually just talking it out. I know for especially with my family, on my dad's side, a lot of times we struggle in going through those stages because we never have outlet to be able to release that, and to be honest and to be transparent. One of the things that I really hold on to, and what Letitia was talking about earlier about, creating those moments, with family, was that before my father had passed, one of the best moments that we were able to have was to be able to have conversation about my journey. Before he even passed, about my journey as far as mental health, anxiety, and depression. And because of that, it allowed us to become closer within that conversation, because we found out that we were battling the same things. Because you had mentioned about being generational, and I think a lot of times we don't recognize what that is until we actually, until somebody actually opens the door to say, hey, look, this is what I'm dealing with. And because I said that, my dad would call me and say, well, hey, I need to talk to you because I think I'm dealing with the same thing. Yeah. And so being able to hold on to that and to continue that even after he is gone has helped me to be able to navigate it. It was hard to accept it. But I think like that was, for me personally, I don't think like the denial, I didn't deny it, but like dealing with other people's denial of it, because of it, was like the hardest thing for me to be able to navigate. And so and because of that, there were a lot of things that were said about me personally that, that was really judging my character because of other people's denial of it. And so I think that was the hardest thing to be able to, navigate. But being able to stay open and being able to talk consistently to the right people that can, help to give, the strategies, the coping strategies and everything. Because honestly, you're going to go through the stages like repeatedly. I've experienced it sometimes. There's not a day that I'd look at a picture and be like, man, I can't believe he's gone. But, but you understand like why. And so I think for me personally, it's just, keeping an open line of just honest, transparent communication with somebody who can professionally handle what I'm about to say. because I think sometimes we talk to people that really can't handle that, and it's not going to do you any good. So being able to do that, and to actually have, a foundation of people that will keep you accountable and keep you on the right track and give you that encouragement to help you, to go along is very important. So I think I've developed like the village, there's 5 people, that are really, that are really just, that we've been able to trust to be able to say, hey, look, this is what we got going on. This is what we need prayer for. And, and being able to hold on to that, because even when you do that, you also hold those people that you talk to accountable for making sure that you go along in that journey. And so that's extremely important to me. I don't ever take that for granted. And so for me personally, again, it's just being able to talk.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, and Letitia, please feel free to chime in. When my mother passed away, it was, I was angry. And, I questioned God, at the first holiday, at her birthday. And, I had to tell myself that it's okay to be angry, but I still had to find, some avenue to release that and to accept that she was gone. And that was about meaning making, right? Making meaning of, asking why was it necessary, in that time. And the more I asked and I sought meaning for that, the more accepting I was. Again, you vacillate through those stages, the more accepting I was of her death. How about you, Letitia?
Yeah, so I definitely feel you on that. I spent several, and even still cycle back to that anger phase of really questioning, like, why did you let this happen to me so early? Why am I having to be a primary caregiver now for someone? I didn't expect that to happen into my 50s. And I think for me, I find myself in different phases in my relationship with, I guess, accepting what's happening, but then also in my relationship with God. So I found myself angry, like you mentioned, and it had got to the point where I had never, before that, I felt wrong feeling angry towards God because of everything that he had given me. It just felt uncomfortable. So it got to the place where it was like, well, I don't want to bring this to you because it almost feels like I'm disrespecting a parent. But being comfortable enough or getting to the point where it's okay to have a conversation where you are angry or you are upset and you are questioning, like, God, why did you do this? Like, why didn't you give me this heads up? You gave me inclinations, and everything else you could have gave me some inclination. I was going to experience this, and being okay with the silence, because you may not get an answer right away, or it may be months or years before you get an answer to that question. But being comfortable, you may have accepted the fact that, that loved one passed or they've moved on, but still in a different stage with your relationship with God, and being comfortable with that separation, knowing eventually it will bridge to acceptance of both, and you hopefully will come back to a place of peace.
Absolutely. And, you mentioned, a good point of, family being one of those, outlets of really trying to express, your grief and your sadness and even your denial of this as well. And so that is one, I think, of the biggest strategies that we can use to help us along in our grief, is that we are able to talk about that. Now, what the timetable is for that, we really don't know, because there is no timetable, right? No one grieves the same. So, grief is not an illness, right, to be remedied. Grief is a process, just as with anything else. It's a process that's going to take patience, that's going to take time. And who knows, when you heal from that, some people are not necessarily healed now. And our vision of things is that, someday he'll come back, or, I'll see them again, or, it's just not the same for everyone. But my question to you all at this point is, how have, obviously when you lose someone, there's a piece of you, right, that leaves you. There's a piece of you that's gone. How have you been able to put the pieces of your life back together again after such a tragic loss of a parent?
Go ahead, Letitia. I know you were going.
I was gonna say, in full transparency, I don't know if I fully have yet. I think, especially as a woman losing a mother, there's always going to be a part of me, and especially as a woman who does not have a child yet and doesn't, in a sense, kind of feels like when that season does happen, I will be kind of going through that alone, and not really having that backdrop to have someone who's went through it and asked, am I doing this right, etc. So part of me is not fully, I would say, healed from that, but I feel like in the larger perspective, you have to look at who's around you and who's still there and kind of focus on that, because those relationships are going to be the ones that carry you over. If you get stuck, that's where the enemy can really come in and mess up your mind. So being okay with realizing like you may not ever fully get that piece together, but being comfortable moving with the pieces that you do have and finding a way to cope with that piece that may not ever fully come complete.
Yeah. So that piece will never come back, right? So life will definitely look a different way. But it's how we, I guess, make meaning of that. And then how do we make that meaning work to fill, right, that void that we might have. So you're absolutely right. It might not ever look the same because it's not the same. That piece of the puzzle is gone. But what can I do with making meaning out of that, right, to kind of puzzle this or piece this together? Absolutely. Johnny, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think there's always going to be a piece of you missing because as a parent, they're such a huge part of who you are. And so for me personally, though, I think this journey has really taught me a lot about, there's so much that I've learned in this journey, like in all aspects. Like when, I always joke about, going to medical school because like with my dad going through what he went through for those 5 years, like you learned so much about what was going on with him that in turn I had to think about my own personal journey and my own personal health and things that I needed to do to be able to be better. Because if I decide to make the change, then that affects not only myself, but the generations that come after me. I also, I recognize that a lot of the reasons why January 5th had happened, which was the day that my father had passed, was based on decisions that were made years ago, and they kept compounding. And then, it gets to a point to like, it builds and it brings it to a point to where, he transitions. And I think for me, that has helped me because I had a lot of guilt when my father had passed. And so because I was there for the journey and, I questioned like, man, did I do enough? Did we do this right? Or did we? And then, God had shown me, had shown me that even in that journey, that's why you needed to be there. So you understood what was going on and what caused this so that you can make those changes and be able not only to be able to affect the generation coming. And so I think what has helped me really to pick up the pieces, or at least some of them, is like Letitia said, was be around people who were be around people who are going to help you and be around people who are going to encourage you, to the people that are just going to, whether you call them at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, that they're gonna have your back. Because even in that, I also learned a lot about who was for me and who really, who really wasn't. And that was a real, like, that punched me in the stomach super hard when that happened. But in that happening, it allowed me to see, who I needed to gravitate to, who I needed to be, who I needed to link up with. And that's, what I've been carrying with me ever since.
Good
And
deal.
so a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now, even the business that I do now, really, it's the work ethic that my father gave me. And so I think about a lot of the things that I'm doing for good and that, that he really instilled in me. He's always wanted to own a business.
Those are the things that you celebrate about him,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Keep that alive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Letitia, I saw you nod your head on, sometimes you feel a sense of guilt. You were in agreement with that. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I went through that experience of guilt as well. When I moved back home in 2017, my father had cancer. So I thought I was moving home, or at least I felt confirmation for God that I was moving home to spend time with him. But in that season, I spent a lot of time trying to build that relationship and with that side of my family, not knowing that in reality I was actually coming home because that was my last year with my mother.
Yeah.
So I feel the guilt of not really recognizing in that season I should have at least balanced my time a little bit more. Not realizing I wouldn't have that was going to be my last years with her. So I feel the guilt of that, and I feel the guilt of just sometimes in caregiving is difficult to watch someone slowly deteriorate mentally, and not always knowing what to do or what to say to that person to make them feel comfortable. So you live that guilt of having to watch them go through that, and not really knowing what to do sometimes. So.
I know, and that's, that is hard to deal with. I watched my husband kind of watch his mom, right, in her last years or so. And that was difficult because you really don't know what to say or what to do to comfort them. But what I found that was really powerful is just your presence. There's no guilt in being present. Because sometimes that's all it is that we can offer is our presence and our support. Your presence is more powerful, I think, than your words, because sometimes we can't even get the right words. We can't think of the words to say, but your presence is really powerful. And that guilt, right? So that guilt is something that has to be mediated. In knowing that, I did the best that I could with what I had and the time I had to do that. So, putting that in the forefront of yourself and that you did the best that you can helps to mediate that. I'm not saying that it helps to completely eradicate what you feel, but definitely it helps to mediate some of that guilt, and that's what we go through. So I want to you guys have some really, really powerful stories, really touching stories and moving stories. And I know that these holidays have not been very easy. But can you tell me if you have any at all? And this we're kind of wrapping up here, but can you tell me how you have celebrated them in your lives, just so that we can understand how you think of them in these moments?
So
go ahead. You're fine. I knew that was gonna happen at the same time. But you go ahead. Patricia.
So I celebrate both of them around the holiday seasons, like I mentioned earlier, taking the time to really, even if she doesn't remember that it's the holiday, allowing her to enjoy and catching as much of those moments on camera and video as possible, and just letting her experience. So last Christmas, we actually celebrated Christmas that whole week because on Christmas Day, she remembered it, but then the next day the tree was still up and she thought it. So we just kept repeating it and keep getting new memories and videos that help me. I know once she gets to the point where that isn't going to be the case, I'll have those with me forever and have those moments to cherish. As far as my mom, she, like Johnny mentioned earlier, my everything, my work ethic and how I move is because of her.
Wow.
And even though she's gone, sometimes I can still how your parent will react. So if I get to the place and I'm questioning, like, should I make this decision? Should I transition to this new job? And I can feel her in a sense, like, that's not right. Or if I'm at the point where I'm dating somebody new, you can feel that little sense like, I don't think my mom would like him and me. Let's move on. So I cherish her and I remember everything that she's taught me, and I do my best to continue to live to make her proud of me.
Absolutely.
And to have her look down and say, that's my daughter and she's doing something amazing in the world, and be proud.
She is proud. She is proud. Johnny, we'll let you end off. In what ways do you celebrate your father?
Well, one, I bought this shirt that I'm wearing for his birthday last year. So, and they called me, said it was too small. So I just said, well, I'll just go ahead and take it. But I was going to exchange it, but he had passed before then. So I just take it with me wherever I go. So I wear it every once in a while. And then even what I'm doing with this business, I mean, every time I go, on a load or whatnot, whether it's 100 miles or 1,000 miles or something, like, this is him. This is his legacy. When I first started this, he drove me to my orientation in Ohio and everything. So every time, like, I'm behind the wheel or something like that, and also those are memories that I've had even as a kid when we took road trips. So I feel him, anytime, like, I go anywhere, I know he's with me and everything. And then too, he was really big on family. So we want to do, we're supposed to get like an Airbnb, and all of us are just going to get together and just, spend time as a family. That was his thing. That's what he wanted to do. Got a birthday coming up in 3 days on 15th. So we're going to release lanterns, in his honor and everything. And so, I think, because we live every day, I think that's just a celebration of just the loved ones that we lost, especially our parents. But I really think that's what it is, because I think we live by, my dad had mentioned about living vicariously through them. Yeah. So I think that every day that we're able to wake up and, do what we do as, just as who we are, is just a celebration of the people that created us. So absolutely.
Absolutely. And, the most important thing, and I'll end right here, the most important thing is that even though, our loved ones are gone in the physical, that they live in our hearts. And if I don't say anything else to end this broadcast, in those times that you hold dear to them, in those times that you think of them and that you make them smile, I want you to smile. And no, I normally say it's okay not to be okay. But in this instance, when we're dealing with grief and we need that smile when we think about them, it's okay to be okay.
Yes, ma'am.
It's okay to be okay. All right. Well, we're going to end right here, and we're going to go into our mental health moment. I want to thank Letitia and Johnny for being our guests in this mental health matter. And we pray that you get something, that you glean something from these powerful stories that these two have brought in. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll go right into our mental health moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I hope that in the first segment, you were able to hear and understand more concretely the stories of Pastor Johnny and Sister Letitia. And hopefully you were able to see those first two stages of grief that I have already mentioned. However, I think through their testimonies that, we can see bits and pieces of all 5 stages of grief. But for the sake of knowledge and just to reassure everyone that, you're not alone in what you're experiencing, and that your experiences of grief and loss are completely normal, we want to flow into the 3rd stage of grief. So the 3rd stage of grief is bargaining. So this is our attempt to make a deal. I know for us coming from a faith-based background, this is probably something that, many of us don't want to see, but, it's those things of, when we begin to question God, we know that God's plan for us is greater than any plan that we have, and he has divinely ordered our steps, and he knows our beginning from our end, and, exactly how things are going to play out. But, as far as bargaining goes, this is things of, say someone has experienced loss in the form of a miscarriage. At the third stage of their grief, this would be feelings of, God, take me instead of my child, and different things like that. So now we will segue more and deeper into our conversation and hear a couple more testimonies of how people have dealt with grief and loss. And, I pray that through this, you are able to further get some insight into your own journeys with grief and loss. So now we will segue into our segment 2 of this episode 1, and we will hear 2 more stories about grief and loss and the experiences of that.
Welcome back to Urban Empowerment's Mental Health Matters. And we are extremely excited to bring you another segment of Mental Health Matters, in where we are coping and talking about holiday grief and how we've journeyed through that. We have a couple of guests here today with us who I'll introduce in just a moment. But before we get started, I would like to say that at any time, because I know that these conversations about grief and loss can become distressful. And so while we're on this broadcast, we have our prayer and process room, where if it happens that you begin to experience some aroused emotions, feel free, as you can see on the screen, to log into our Zoom account to the prayer and process room. That room is there to help you during these discussions. So what I want to do is to introduce our 2 guests today. We have with us Miss Samantha. Would you care to introduce yourself?
Hey y'all, it's me, Sam. I am originally from Monroe, Louisiana. I moved to Columbia for high school because of my parents' job. Left for college, came back, and that is when I decided to join Urban Empowerment and had the time of my life, singing praise and worship and serving with everybody and forming this great family. Met my husband there, all the fun things, but Urban is family to me. And I work in lending for a large company.
Good deal. Well, we thank you, Samantha, for joining us today. And I look to hear your story and your journey through your grief. We also have with us Miss Sharina Wallace. Would you care to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. As Pastor Chris said, my name is Sharina Wallace. I relocated to Columbia in about 2003 and stayed there for quite some time. While I was there, I became a part of UE and the family, and I was a part of praise and worship, spoken word, praise, dancing. It was just a great experience to have the Lord come into my life at that time and just work on me, but then also be able to work on me amongst family and friends. So I am very, very humbled to be here to have this discussion with you all today.
Wow. You know what? I just want to say welcome home. Even if it's for these short 30 minutes, welcome home. Yes. I am Pastor Christine. I'll be the facilitator today. As you know, I'm a pastor. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker and therapist. And so I am right at home as well. So again, thank you guys for joining us here, Sharina and Samantha, and also to those of you who are viewing the broadcast. So I'm going to just jump right into it. Is that okay, guys?
That's great.
Perfect.
Okay. So, you know, the purpose of this particular segment is to talk about, holiday grief and, what your journey has been. I know it's been some while for you, Samantha, and then, of course, Sharina, you have a different perspective on dealing with grief. And so, there used to be this notion that, holiday grief, it just kind of happened at the holidays, right? Between November and January. But, I kind of see this as happening as a year-long process because, you have birthdays, you have Mother's Day, Father's Day, Memorial Days, all those things that we normally celebrate with our loved ones. So, I don't want to just limit that to the holidays because I also think that grief is a part of, everything that we do.
Yes.
And, you guys have lost a loved one, and we want to really hear your experience with grief. And so, Samantha, I'll let you talk a little bit about, what has been your experience with grief, and then especially now at the holidays as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I lost my father October 16th, 2012. So it's been just over 8 years. He died of sarcoidosis of the lung. So it was a lung disease that he had since he was about 30. So he had it for a long time, but I think it went unchecked until his lung collapsed. So from his lung collapsing in February, he died in October. So that part was kind of quick. For me, I come from an extremely tight-knit family. Like, still to this day, I talk to my mother and my 3 siblings every day. Every single day. So, and my father it was the same exact way. So very tight, very close-knit. And then our birthdays are a day apart. So every birthday, it's different. This year with COVID, I think I was doing pretty good. And then this year I've been trying to avoid it instead of happily anticipating it. I've been just kind of well, maybe I just won't talk about him on this day, and then the day passes and I'm in shambles.
Yeah,
The same day,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned COVID, and that to me is just an extra layer of grief, right? Because grief is not only your emotional response to what you have physically lost, but grief is also a emotional response to any loss, whether that's loss of control, loss of your own agency to go to and from wherever you want to go. So on top of dealing with the grief from your loved person, right? You're grieving kind of this whole pandemic and what that has mean for you, and of course in all of this new normal. So I could see the additive of an extra layer of grief, so to speak, that you have to work through.
I'm in a bubble now. Now she's in a bubble because we can't lose her. So.
Absolutely, and you're going to do everything that you can to protect her. I totally
Exactly.
get that. Yeah, Sharina, you've experienced, kind of, a different type of loss than Samantha, where she's lost her father. Can you tell us about the loss that you've recently here experienced? And that I know that this is kind of fresh, so take your time and just kind of share with us your journey at this point.
Sure. So personally, I have not experienced a loss in my immediate family in quite some time. So to have to go through the process of grief, it is a process that I haven't been familiar with quite a while. But just recently, November 11th, 2020, the father of 4 of my children, I have a total of 7 children. The father of 4 of my children passed away completely unexpected. My kids are 18, 16, 14, and 12, 2 boys and 2 girls. And this grief process has been completely different because as a mother, you never want to see your children feel the pain and the hurt of losing a parent or their father. You never want to have to go through that experience with your child, regardless of whatever, the relationship is that you have with that father. You never want this. You never wish that, because at the end of the day, the surviving parent, you are the one that has to be there to support those children and go through that process. So it's not something that you even think about. But now that is my reality, I can tell you that I have witnessed firsthand grief differently, just as they each individually have their own grieving process. And it is an unstable time, unfortunately, but that is what grief is, because I have one child that may be emotional one day, and then I have one child that may be angry the next day, or it could all happen at the same time. And as a mother, I feel like it's my responsibility to make sure that I am managing those emotions in the most healthiest way, so that at the end of this, they come out in a better position emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually. I feel like that's my charge, because they are my children. So to experience grief from a secondhand perspective, if you will, as a mother, it's really challenging, because not only do I have the challenge of experiencing grief for as a mother, I also have it because he was my ex-husband. And so we did have our own relationship. And then not only that role, also just as a woman in general, and just processing grief, being a Black woman in this world, in this society, and being able to have those emotions and have those feelings and stand in that and say that I'm supposed to feel this right now, and it is okay, and I'm going to feel it. But at the end of the day, I trust God, and I know that God has gotten me from so much more, that he is faithful and just to get me through this. It's not easy, but that is what I have to know, and I stand on what I know. So.
Oh my God, girl, I don't want to preach on this episode, but you're pushing me, so don't push me. But,
I'm just gonna do my part.
Just do your part. I mean, wow, you had some preaching points, let me tell you. And, thank you for sharing that story. And, both of you guys' stories are completely different, but, the commonality really is that grief is not, as you deal with it in your own perspectives, right? It's not an illness that, right, you can be healed from. It's individual. It's a journey. So on your journeys, they're going to be crafted a little bit different, because there's no one size fits all, right, for how you cope with loss. And those bonds, right, that we form with other people or our loved ones, those bonds, we would want them to continue after death. And you mentioned, Sharina, about being a Black woman and, feeling the way that you want to feel and owning those feelings. There are so many, you too, Samantha, there's so many expectations that are put on Black women in terms of how we act, how we talk, how we want to express our emotions, and
exactly.
that, we're strong, and we're strong to a point. I believe, because I had somebody to tell me, people give us breadcrumbs and want us to make banana bread, and we really do, right?
We do.
But there's a point in time where we will break down, and that strongness has to fall, no matter what expectations or what society says. We feel.
Yes. And Pastor Chris, I think that's because we're human. At the end of the day, we're human, and we have those emotions and we have these experiences in life, and we do no good to ourselves to not acknowledge those experiences, but then to acknowledge and commit to heal from those emotions.
Yeah. And that's good. And, just from the perspective, and Samantha, I'm coming for you, just from that perspective, as you're dealing with your children, some who are girls, so you have boys too, but dealing with that, as you begin to try and work through emotions with your children, and I'm going to give you a chance to kind of expound upon that, emotion regulation is important, right? Because some children who come from, a complicated family structure or an unloving environment will fare differently in their grief than children who are from, and you mentioned God, I am a God lover, and I know that God can bring us through anything. He is someone who would not fail. He will not leave us nor forsake us. He would not leave us out. I've never seen him reach his hand where we're begging bread. I'm not going to preach, but I just believe that. And so being from a God-fearing woman and them having, a stable background and a stable, loving home, they're proportionately, they can get through this and be healthy emotionally as they get through this. So tell me, how do you handle, some of those emotions that they feel, and especially now that we're in Christmas and going into the new year? How have you been able to do that?
Of course. I would say, first off, it's validation. Yeah. Just validating that whatever they're feeling, it's real, and that is the biggest thing to me. And I've not just in this particular time of loss of their father, but just in my parenting, because I come from a completely different parental reference growing up. So just validating how they feel and letting them know that I got you, regardless of how you feel or regardless of what's going on. At the end of the day, I'm here and I have you. It takes that understanding of knowing who your children are. So for example, Xavier, he's my 16-year-old. He and his sister, who are 14, were living with their father at the time of his passing. And Xavier had been living with him for 2 years. So that's a good chunk of time to not have the relationship built and established that I wanted to have with him. So now where we find ourselves at a point where we have to find some way to come together. And just by God's grace, it has been the death of his father that brings us together. It's nothing but a blessing because it allows me to love on my son, and it allows me to hug him, and it allows me to give him those mother things that I had not been able to do for 2 years. So I personally have to just push to see God in it all, regardless of how frustrated I am, regardless of how angry I am, regardless of how I feel like this is not fair, that God, I was already a single mother, so now I have to be a single mother that has no father for support at all. You know, it's easy to go that way. And because I am who I am, I do have those moments. But at the end of the day, for me, it's about my children. It's about my babies. So whatever it is that I have to put aside to make sure that their needs are met, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. And it looks like you really have been able to create some meaning, right? So meaning making is good when it comes to grief and how you conceptualize that. And I dare to say that there's even healing in grief. You know, you mentioned that, you know, the relationship with your son is healing.
Yes.
And so we also have to take grief in perspective in that it also is healing for us as well. And Samantha, I want to kind of ask you, you know, your father has been gone over the last couple of years, and you've grieved, and we know that there's this grieving process, right, of denial, anger, and bargaining, and guilt, and acceptance. And you've had a long journey with that. So how have you conceptualized your grief in terms of these, what we would say, stages of grief?
I would say for the first probably 3 or 4 years, it was not real to me in my mind. I just told y'all how I speak to my family every day, but those were the conversations we were having. So I internalized it. You don't want to upset your mom, your sister, your brothers, your grandma. You don't want to upset them. So I internalized a lot, and I didn't deal with it for a long time. We worked for the same company. So everybody in the building, because my dad was a friendly guy. So everybody's, oh, how are you? How are you? How are you? Oh, I'm fine. I busy myself in church or anything else I could to keep my mind going. And then I moved to Dallas, where we were forced to kind of just like me and Kevin just be in each other's faces, and then everything collapsed.
Yeah.
Which was the best and worst thing that could have ever happened, but it caused me to kind of seek the help that I needed in counseling and having those dialogues with my sisters and people who care about him, and just being able to talk about it more openly and feel better about it. But it was definitely, for a few years, he was on this vacation that I had made up in my mind, honestly.
And, you know, that acceptance is a big part of going through that process. You know, I can recall the demise of my mom, and, you know, I didn't really have to deal with it because, you know, she was living in Kansas City. I was already in Columbia. So after the funeral, you know, I was here. And so for a long time, it was just like, okay, when I go home, she'll be there. But of course, I never went home because I was afraid, right, to accept that she wasn't there. And so that acceptance and denial for me was really strong for several years. And so, you know, that goes to show us that grief is not, there's no time limit to grief. There's no just get over it and you'll be fine. Like you really can't do that, but you have to allow that to be okay sitting in that, right? And you get through it when you get through it. And obviously there are pieces of us, right, that are taken when a loved one does leave us. have either of you, I know, Sharina, it's been fairly recent, but how have you guys been able to kind of put those pieces, so to speak, back together?
I would say honestly, we're still figuring that out.
Mhm.
I know that what we do, what I make a point to do with them is to say his name.
Mhm.
Say his name. If I have a memory or if I have a thought that comes up, I don't swallow it. I speak it, because at the end of the day, it's real. You know, death is real, and grief is even more real as I'm experiencing it. But so was his life,
Wow.
and so was his memory. You know, and so is the fact that, you know, we have 4 children. Kayliana is graduating high school early, starting community college, going on to a 4-year college. You know, they're all doing great things that need to be celebrated. Josiah has a birthday on Monday and he turns 12, and this is the first birthday that his dad is not going to be there. You know, that's a real moment. So I just encourage them to just be real, and I am real with them. If I'm having a moment and I'm having a bad day, I tell them, you know, I'm struggling today. Because I want them to know that they're not alone. I want them to know that they hurt and I hurt too. You know, yes, my hurt may be different, but it does not lessen the fact that it's still hurt and that it's real and it's something that we can relate to, and it's something that we can bond in and something that we can grow in together. So
Absolutely, absolutely, and to say that grief or, you know, death doesn't hurt, it hurts, and
yeah, it does.
it hurts for a long time. Samantha, how about you? How have you worked toward putting the pieces back together?
We talk about him often. We laugh. He had the best personality. So we tell these funny stories. We love getting. A lot of my family have transitioned here to Dallas, so we get together and just laugh, and we just have a really good time. Because honestly, we sit back and, like, even the day he died, I remember me and my mom were kind of fussing in the hospital. And he was like, all right, girls. And that was kind of the last thing he said. But he believed in family. He believed in fun, you know. So
Yeah.
we get together, we love on one another, and we laugh, honestly.
That's good.
You know,
That's good.
I just feel like if you ain't laughing, you ain't living.
Yeah. But I like that she creates a space for her children to feel their feelings. I think for several years I didn't. And you know what I mean? And so I love that you're already addressing that right now, so you can have those feelings, because you need to. I'm just now getting to that point 8 years later.
Gotcha. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and so there's no time limit to that.
There isn't.
I get happy when I get happy. You know, I know that's not very good English, but that's the way I feel it on the inside. When I'm ready to be happy, I'm ready to be happy, right? And you know, I've learned even through my journey. I used to be like, you know, if I laugh, that just means that she'll think I don't care about her, you know, or I don't love her. But it is okay to be okay. I know that, you know, my motto is that it's okay not to be okay, but it is okay to be okay with their memories.
Yes.
And with your life, right? They would want you to do that. If they are the kind of people that I think they were, I know that they'll tell you, if you're not laughing, you're not living. Not at
That's
all.
true.
My dad's favorite line was he only has to do 2 things, and that's stay black and die. So on the road to death, he always made it very clear, like, hey, this is gonna happen at some point, if not now, later. So you may as well move on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, obviously the holidays are a little more different, right, than I would say some other day. I won't be specific about that, but for the holidays, how have you incorporated them in, you know, your rituals, like, right, your celebrations and things like that?
For me, my mom handed me down the traditional, like, Christmas ornaments, like the goofy ones, not the cute ones that people are doing now. I finally received, like, the family Christmas stuff. So we've been doing that. And then we have a 3-year-old who now knows what, like, Christmas is. She's like, look, mommy, it's Christmas. So that keeps things happy and keeping the traditions alive. I did my first turkey this year, and I remembered helping him. He would deep fry turkeys and sell them. So I remember prepping them with him, and I remembered how he made his special seasonings. So I blended that up and made my first turkey.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been a year of like, okay, my baby knows what's going on, so this has to be happy. So we're just gonna roll with this tradition. We're gonna keep it like, whoo.
Sharina, how about you?
I know for us, these are our first Christmases and Thanksgiving without their dad. So I don't know what to expect. I know for me, I was talking with a good friend of mine, and the suggestion was made to do a balloon release, to write something down that they loved, a good memory that they had of their dad, and then to put that in the balloon and then release it. And to me, you know, one thing I do know about my children is that they do use words for therapy, and I think that would be a great release for them. For some of them who really, you know, can't verbalize what they're feeling, writing it down may be a great outlet. So I'm really considering that. But other than that, this has been such a emotional month
Absolutely.
that honestly, having a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and it's Christmas time, you know, I just want to just make sure that there are a lot of smiles and that we're enjoying each other. So
Absolutely. No, I thank you guys for sharing your stories. And, you know, I want to ask you if there is one tidbit of advice that you would want to give those who are watching. Briefly, what would you want to say? What advice would you want to give, Sharina?
I would say, take your time.
Mm-hmm.
Pace yourself. It is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
That you will have days that while you're on this track, you will want to get off, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you get back on. That in the middle of running, you will just want to stop and slow down, and it's okay that you need to do that. Because one thing I can say is that I don't know how to do this. And that's one thing that I spoke very early on as I was speaking to my people in my circle. I was like, you know, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to get 4 children through the loss of their father. I've never been in that position. I personally have never been in the position to have to do this. So I don't know how to do this, but I do know that God will give me everything that I need to get me through it. And that is honestly it. Every day is different. Every day is a blessing. And every day just comes with whatever it comes with. And my commitment is that we will get through it. We don't go to bed angry with each other anymore. Just because, you know, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. From their dad, we learned that we're not even guaranteed the next moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to make sure that I'm creating a space for my children that is healthy, that is completely holistically healthy for them. Because I think through our experience as a family, we have experienced enough unhealthiness that we deserve, you know, we deserve to experience the healthy side of life. And as long as I'm breathing, we are going to get it. So, I
really admire your courage, your strength, and your perseverance. And those are 3 things that will take you a long way in this process, is that courage, that strength, and perseverance. So you keep walking in that and keep walking in your healing as well as the healing of your children. Samantha, what would you advice would you give to those who might be watching who are in the same place you might be in?
Take the mask off.
Mm.
Take the mask off and process and grieve. It's time out. You need to do this for yourself.
Yeah.
I know it makes everyone else feel uncomfortable for you to smile, but if you do not want to smile, don't. Do not cry. That is okay. Be sad. Sit in that for a little while, not too long, but sit in it and deal. That is one thing I wish I would have done from the very beginning.
Yeah.
For sure.
And that's great advice. And we never know what it's going to be like, right? Because each journey is different. And so I think that advice is universal advice to sit in it and be okay, to experience each and every emotion. It's okay, but allow yourself to feel them. Allow yourself to feel them.
So
I
true.
want to thank you all for your stories. I want to thank you for joining us today. And we're going to end right here to sit in all of those emotions so that you heal. Allow yourself to sit in and feel those. We're going to end right there and go out into our mental health moment. And again, we thank you for joining in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have once again heard some dynamic experiences and stories of grief. I think in this segment, something unique was that we heard a personal experience of grief, and we also heard from a mother who is helping her children to now navigate grief. And I think that, these are two very important, varying perspectives, because while we may not be experiencing feelings of grief in this season, we are likely connected to someone who may be experiencing grief. So it's important that, our loved ones have the support, they have the love, they have the care, the encouragement and empowerment that they need to navigate this situation that they're in right now. So maybe this is not for you, but I pray that you were able to take something from this segment that you can share with others to help them to navigate their journey. But we want to close this out with going into the final two stages of grief. So these stages would happen to be depression and acceptance. I know in the faith community, depression is often a taboo experience or a taboo subject, but it's something that each and every one of us experiences. And when I use depression as this stage, it does not necessarily, while it may warrant a clinical diagnosis of depression, but sometimes we all feel depressed. And just for the sake of the definition, this would be intense feelings of sadness that go beyond the ordinary. However, that are short term and don't necessarily meet that time length for a clinical diagnosis. So again, this is something that is completely normal. And, if you are experiencing depression right now, I encourage you not to give in to the stigma, not to feel weird, not to feel like you're crazy, not to feel like your faith is lacking. Just settle into your process and, go through it as you need to. So our final stage of grief would be acceptance. Before I actually go into acceptance, I do want to preface this with, maybe you don't cycle through these stages one after one and immediately get to acceptance. There might be some people who cycle through the first four stages over and over and over again until they get to acceptance. And that is absolutely okay. Each of us have unique stories. We have unique experiences. We process things differently. So if you don't automatically get to acceptance after all of these stages, that is okay. As Pastor Christine has mentioned several times in our broadcast, it is absolutely okay not to be okay. But also remember that it's okay to be okay. So just for acceptance, that would be the place where we would be able to acknowledge that what we have experienced is in fact a reality, that loss has happened. I have moved away from my family. I have ended this marriage. My loved one has passed. But, this is when we are able to, in our last segment, we even saw people laughing as they discuss grief. This is a place where, we're able to really realize, this happened and it's okay. And I am good and I'm going to be able to move on. So with that, we would like to wrap up and we will pass it back to Pastor Christine as she gives us a few final thoughts and remarks before we close for the evening.
Thank you so much for joining in to our Mental Health Matters, because mental health really matters. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that something was said here that will encourage you to take good care of yourself for the holidays and for days to come. Listen, grief is not just in the holidays. grief can last all year long. And so it is important that you seek care and that you take care of your mental health. Look, there is nothing wrong with a therapist, nothing wrong in talking to your friends about what's happening to you. Look, this is your mental health and you have to take care of you. If you don't take care of your mental health, who is? And, you know, especially in this season, as we're wrapping up, I usually have the motto that it's okay not to be okay, but also in this season, when you think of your loved ones and you start to include them in your holiday celebrations and thoughts and actions of them, remember that it's okay to be okay. All right. So again, thank you so much. And mental health is important and it really matters. So please take care of yourself. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. From Urban Empowerment and Bishop Woods. Thank you.